This is the second video for the final exam for U.S. history. We're going to be picking up with question 36 where we left off from the first recording. Number 36, how did many farmers deal with the Dust Bowl? They left their farms for California. They formed co-ops and purchased irrigation equipment. They developed drought-resistant strains of their crops and recovered from their losses. Number 37, what happened to marriage and birth rates during the Great Depression? They remained about the same. Marriage rates increased, but birth rates declined, or they declined as people became reluctant to take on additional responsibility. Number 38, how did Herbert Hoover's philosophy of government affect the Depression? It deepened the Depression because nothing was done to address the causes. It eased the effects of the Depression because financial institutions knew they could respond freely. It created a congressional roadblock because Hoover threatened to veto any proposed legislation. Number 39. How did Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats affect the American people during the Depression and the beginning of World War II? They reduced people's belief that Congress would take appropriate actions. They created a sense of distrust that improvements were all talk and no action. They raised their confidence that things would improve. Number 40. What was the name for Franklin Roosevelt's agenda for solving the problems of the Great Depression? The Good Deal, the New Agenda, or the New Deal? Number 41. Which agency was not created during Roosevelt's New Deal? The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Department of Housing and Urban Development, or Social Security Administration? 42. What were the main goals of Roosevelt's New Deal legislation? Relief, recovery, and reform, assistance for the poor and recovery for the rich, new institutions and buyouts of investments. Number 43. How did the leadership of many European governments change during the 1930s? New leaders asserted the importance of democracy, kings regained control in war-torn areas, or fascist dictators assumed power. Number 44. What actions taken by some European leaders in the 1930s contributed to the start of World War II? Invading other countries to add territory, refusing to pay the debts incurred during World War I, raising taxes far beyond people's ability to pay. Which action indicated that the United States wanted to return to a policy of isolationism during the 1930s? The Navy began more vigorous border patrols, Congress passed 5 neutrality laws, or the League of Nations censured the United States. Number 46. Why did the United States finally enter World War II? The Soviet Union refused to pay back debts it owed, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, or Germany invaded Poland. Number 47. What U.S. policies violated the constitutional rights of some citizens during World War II? Internment and detention of Japanese citizens in camps, arresting protesters who wanted to voice concerns about the cost of the war, or preventing movie-tone news from showing casualties being returned home. Number 48. How did women play a role in World War II? By producing inspirational radio programs that were broadcast to GIs, by enlisting the military and working in civilian jobs that had typically been held by men, or by running for political offices that men were unavailable to fill. Number 49. Following World War II, Stalin refused to remove Soviet troops from Eastern Europe. This unofficially signaled the first challenge for the United Nations, the power of the Soviet Union over the other allies, or the beginning of the Cold War. Number 50. Name the U.S. policy towards communism following World War II. Containment, destruction, propaganda. Number 51. What was the original purpose of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, formed in 1949? To more accurately map all of Europe, Asia, and Africa to protect member countries? To create a group that would monitor the detonation of atomic bombs? or to form a bloc of Western nations to defend against Soviet aggression. Number 52. What June 1950 action caused the United Nations to respond with military action? Japan invaded South Korea, the Soviet Union invaded North Korea, or North Korea invaded South Korea. Number 53. What was the result of the Korean War? The two nations formed the Republic of Korea, which functions as a democracy. A peace treaty established one unified democratic nation, or a ceasefire agreement created a demilitarized zone along the 38th parallel. Question number 54. Who was Senator Joseph McCarthy? A presidential candidate who lost to Dwight Eisenhower in the 1952 election, a popular radio and TV commentator who appealed to right-wing extremists, or a U.S. senator who accused hundreds of Americans of being communists? Number 55. Why were some people surprised that President Eisenhower emphasized peace and warned against too much emphasis on the military? He had been the Allied commander of the military in World War II. He was a hawk about the Vietnam War. He had been a CEO of an aviation company that built military jets. Which president cautioned the United States about the importance of monitoring the power of the military industrial complex? Kennedy, Harry Truman, or Dwight Eisenhower? Number 57. What was one result of the U.S. participation in covert actions in Latin America and the Middle East during the 1950s? Sympathy for communism increased and anti-American sentiment grew. Because the actions were secret, there was little effect, or the United States gained strong allies in the region. Number 58. What was one result of increased consumer spending after World War II? Consumers overspent and fell into debt. The economy grew slowly. The economy grew quickly. Number 59. What was the baby boom? An epidemic that caused the death of many babies. The drop in birth rates following World War II. The significant population growth following World War II. Number 60. The congressional decision to pass legislation funding an interstate highway system in the 1950s indicated that states were not adequately providing transportation, congressional interest in providing jobs, or a response to the growing car culture. Question 61. How did television affect American society beginning in the 1950s? Television promoted a common culture. Television heightened interest in books and newspapers. Television encouraged people to help others. 62. What helped propel John F. Kennedy to the presidency in the 1960 election? His prior experience as vice president, an army of young volunteers, televised debates that communicated his charm. Number 63. Why were blacks eager to participate in the civil rights movement following World War II? They resented not being provided the educational benefits of the GI Bill. They had returned from military service to find Jim Crow laws still in place. The political emphasis placed on conformity antagonized black voters. 64. What did not play a significant role in the civil rights movement? Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus. Freedom rides throughout the South. The election of Dwight D. Eisenhower as president. Number 65. What laws passed during the Johnson administration eliminated segregation in public places and discrimination in voting? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Act of 1968, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, or the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Procedure Reform Act of 1966. Medicare and Medicaid were part of Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, Social Security Plan, or the Fair Deal. Number 67. What was the significance of the landmark Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education. The public school choice was no longer legal. Separate but equal schools were inherently unequal and unconstitutional. School curriculum must include information on the civil rights movement. Number 68. What event preceded the Cuban Missile Crisis? A thwarted invasion off the coast of Florida to invade the United States, a direct Soviet threat on the United States, an invasion at the Bay of Pigs to attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro. Number 69. What was the outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis? An unplanned explosion in Caribbean waters scared all nations into limiting nuclear power. The Soviet Union removed its missiles from Cuba, and the United States agreed to remove its missiles from Turkey. Or the United States agreed that it was up to the Cuban government to allow the missiles or not. Number 70. What theory did 4 U.S. presidents use to justify U.S. participation in the Vietnam War? A bridge against communism, the domino theory, or solitary confinement. Number 71. What allowed President Johnson to send additional troops to Vietnam without a formal declaration of war? Voters in the 1964 election, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, or the Selective Service Act. Number 72. What view of the Vietnam War led to objections about U.S. participation there? The United States should have attacked more forcefully at the outset to win the war quickly. The United States was interfering in another nation's civil war. The Vietnamese should seek assistance from nations that were closer. Number 73. What was the outcome of the 1968 Tet Offensive? A military victory for South Vietnam and a psychological victory for North Vietnam? A turning point in the war that eventually led to the South Vietnamese victory? Or a military victory for North Vietnam and a psychological victory for South Vietnam? 74. What was the eventual outcome of the Vietnam War? The fall of Saigon led to a unified communist Vietnam. A ceasefire led to the establishment of a neutral zone between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. The fall of Hanoi led to the unified democratic Vietnam. Number 75. What 1960s group opposed the traditional values of the establishment? The liberal left, the counterculture, or the draft dodgers? Number 76. What was part of the second wave of the women's movement? The passage of voting rights for women, publication of the Feminine Mystique, or the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment? Number 77, and your final question is, what inspired gays and lesbians, American Indians, and Hispanics to organize and advocate for their civil rights during the 1960s? Television shows that featured them as leading characters, Minority Movement, A Handbook for Achieving Civil Rights, or the African American success with their civil rights movement. That's the end of your test for the final exam. Make sure to save your answers to your computer and to submit the completed test to me through Kmail. Make sure that your name is on it as well. I will grade it manually and then enter your score in your gradebook. Let me know if you have any questions at all, and good luck on your test.